Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Today, let's talk for a little bit about the Boston Celtics. The last time I made a video about the Boston Celtics, I think I called it like the Boston Celtics are falling apart, because at that point in the season, they were falling apart. When I made that video late December, I think like the 28th or so, the Celtics were 16-18. They were 10th in the Eastern Conference, had just lost a couple really bad games. And really, they had just been on a stretch that was pretty embarrassing for a team that was hopeful to try and compete for a championship, or at least expected to be by pretty much everyone pretty firmly in that Eastern Conference playoff race. Instead, they were sitting at the 10 seed. Jayson Tatum had been struggling. Jaylen Brown had missed some time here and there. And even when he was playing, he wasn't super consistent. There were questions about Ime Udoka as a coach. I remember my timeline being filled with Celtics fans talking about how they weren't sure if he was the right hire. They wanted him fired. They just weren't sure where Jayson Tatum went as a star player. Everything was kind of up in the air for the Boston Celtics. There were calls about maybe you break up Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, and even in that video I said I think you could start fielding those offers. I'm not quite sure I would do that just yet, but I think it makes sense that really something needed to change for the Boston Celtics. And now, as we flash forward to the present, not much has changed, and yet everything has changed for the Boston Celtics. Not much has changed personnel-wise, but right now the Celtics are on an 8-game win streak. They're the hottest team in the NBA at the moment. They're 17-6 with their intended starting 5 over the course of this season, and if you put that over an 82-game pace, that's a 60-game win pace. So 15-4 as well in their last 19 games, and right now they're the 6th seed, which is only 4.5 games out of the 1st seed at the moment. So they're fully in contention and only 2 games back of the 5 seed. So they're fully there and in contention for home court advantage in the playoffs. Things have switched drastically for this Boston Celtics team. And so I want to make a video kind of talking about what's changed and really what has been so good for the Celtics as of recently. Really, since the calendar is flipped from 2021 to 2022, the Celtics look like a completely brand new team. So let's talk about it. By far, the biggest thing for them has been their lockdown defense, which has been the best in the league since I made that last video, and it's been how they've been winning games. They have the 2nd best defensive rating in the league this season, only behind the Golden State Warriors, and they're catching up with them pretty fast. I wouldn't be surprised if pretty soon the Boston Celtics do have the best rating over the course of the whole season, and their rating was pretty like meh to start the year. It's not like they've been this phenomenal defense all year. They've just completely flipped the switch, and that has become their identity. They're a team that's going to lock you up, hit the shots when they need to, and beat you on the defensive side of the ball more than not. They're first in the NBA in opponent efficient field goal percentage, which means that they're locking people up. People aren't shooting well against them. And really it comes from a key couple players, but really just them as a full unit, really buying in defensively. But those key pieces that I do want to start off talking about are Robert Williams and Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart, I feel like he's pretty common as a household name for an all-defensive caliber guy. He gets in guys' faces. He's what you would call a defensive pest, someone who is never going to leave the guy that he's guarding alone. He can guard opposing guards. He can guard forwards. Hell, Marcus Smart can really get in there in the post if he needs to. He's strong enough. He'll get up onto guys, and he'll really just make guys uncomfortable wherever he is on the court. He's got that reputation for flopping, whatever. Marcus Smart is a great winning basketball player. He makes great defensive plays. He hits some shots when you need him to. Even if he's not a great shooter, it feels like Smart kind of just hits big time shots. At times he's going to draw charges, offensive fouls, really just cause the opposing team to mess up. And that is the type of player that every championship team needs, or just every good team in general needs, that guy that's going to get up in guys' faces, play great defense, be your stopper, and kind of be a heart and soul of the team. And that's what Smart's been for a while. There are many rumors that he might get moved at the deadline, but the Celtics did decide to hang on to them, and it's not surprising that they did decide to hold on to him with the way that this team is flipped the script completely defensively. Him being the leader of that defensive squad, it makes sense. He's a guy that should 100% get all defensive love, along with another guy on the roster, Robert Williams. Robert Williams, I have long said, is kind of the missing piece for this team, which sounds weird because he's on the roster. But the problem has been that Robert Williams hasn't been able to stay healthy. He either misses time with health, he needs to rest a couple of days, he can't play big minutes because of health. There's just always been issues with Robert Williams staying on the court for as much time as the Celtics would like him to, and as maybe they need him to. But as of recently, Robert Williams has really been available for this team, and it's paying huge dividends for the Celtics, both offensively and especially defensively. Because Robert Williams is a ridiculous freak athlete. This man, there have been so many possessions that I'll see watching Celtics games where Robert Williams will jump to contest a shot, come back down, and jump again before anyone else on the court has jumped once. It feels like he double jumps sometimes with his ability to go up and get blocks, get rebounds, his athleticism. He covers so much ground around the rim that guys a lot of times will have layups that look wide open, but because Robert Williams is nearby, they're just not there. And guys are afraid to shoot. He alters shots with his athleticism, his length. Robert Williams just gets in the way of pretty much anybody going into the paint, and that's huge for the Celtics team because they've always had pretty solid perimeter defenders, but having that guy that can lock up down there in the paint is super critical because teams are going to try and attack them down low, and you can't because Robert Williams is right there. So him being that all-defensive caliber guy, I'm not saying him and Marcus Smart will both make all-defensive teams, but I do think the way that they've been playing, they deserve some love for consideration of those teams, the way that they've been playing and really anchoring this team. So around those two guys, that great perimeter defender and just really all-around defender in Marcus Smart and that rim protector in Robert Williams is enough to make a pretty solid defensive squad as long as you have other, at least neutrals, in the lineup. But when you consider the fact that they just added Derek White at the trade deadline, who's a great guard defender, one of, in my opinion, the most underrated guard defenders in the league, as well as fitting their offensive scheme, that makes them even better. And when you add in the fact that Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown themselves are plus defenders, when you roll out a starting lineup, or not even a starting lineup, but a defensive unit of Marcus Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, and Robert Williams, that's a ridiculous defensive five. It is so hard to score on those guys. If you get past Smart and White on the perimeter, Tatum and Brown as the wing defenders can help out a bit. They've got a lot of length and they're super athletic too. And if you get past all of them, Robert Williams is still there. They just make life so difficult offensively for opposing teams. And it's shown, like I mentioned, in their defensive rating, in their win rate. They're just locking up on the defensive end of the ball. Credit to Ime Udoka. He's really got the guys to buy into that defensive identity, using their talents, using their strengths in the way that they need to win basketball games. And as well, offensively, especially the Celtics lead duo has kind of found their rhythm. Jayson Tatum in 2021, as I mentioned, he was really struggling. He was missing shots way more than he typically does. He was shooting 41.7% from the field over the course of 2021, which is terrible for a guy of Jayson Tatum's caliber. But he's eventually found his rhythm. There were all these things with the ball, foul changes. A lot of players that started off pretty mediocre efficiency-wise really have started to take steps up as the season has gone on. And Tatum is now shooting 46% from the field in 2022, averaging about 26 points per game. He's back to the Jayson Tatum that we know. He's a lot more efficient. He's putting up big scoring performances, including a couple massive ones, a 50-plus game against, I believe it was the Washington Wizards not too long ago. So all around, Jayson Tatum has kind of found his groove. His three-point shooting is still a bit below his career numbers, but he's trending upwards. Jaylen Brown is averaging 24 points per game in 2022. His shooting percentage is 3% up from 2021 to 2022, going from 44% to 47%, which isn't a huge jump, but it continues the trend of the Celtics finding the rhythm offensively, as well as kind of adhering to this new defensive identity, which has really kind of got them to the place that they're at right now. You add in the fact that it feels like when I've watched the Celtics play, they've become a lot less stagnant offensively in crunch time. As I mentioned, they lost a lot of really close clutch time games, including a few overtime games, fourth quarter games, just all around collapses, because at the start of the season, it felt like the Celtics kind of fell into what their offense has a lot of times fallen into over the course of recent history. The Celtics have always been a team where when things kind of slow down a little bit, they can occasionally slip a little bit too much into iso ball between Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And sure, they're phenomenal players. 100%, it makes sense to give them the ball when things get down to the most important part of the game, crunch time. However, it became super predictable, and especially at the start of this season, it felt like teams knew exactly what was coming, and so anytime the Celtics got in this crunch time situation, teams would just really commit to guarding Tatum or Brown. They would ISO, it wouldn't work out, and then they slowly started to just chip away at the lead until the Celtics had just lost. So they've really started to become less stagnant. Every time I watch a Celtics game, there are still those times where eventually they will kind of stagnate here and there, which kind of is just how it works. Having two great isolation scores, it makes sense that they would get the ball. but they've been a lot more team oriented, it feels like. I don't have any stats to necessarily prove that, but from watching a lot of Celtics games, my roommate is a huge Celtics fan. I can kind of attest to the fact that it feels like they've gotten a little bit less stagnant offensively, especially in those late game situations that they were blowing a lot earlier in the season. And finally, I just want to give a shout to a couple of the role players. For example, Grant Williams shooting 43% from 3 this season. He is huge for them. Peyton Pritchard, he's also having a pretty decent season. He started off pretty rough, but he's getting a bit better. And I do think him being their backup point guard and playing a little more off ball than he typically has over the course of the season could help them out as well. So just want to give a shout to those guys quickly. And yeah, so that is kind of the Boston Celtics. They've really bought into this defensive identity. They found their rhythm offensively. And right now they're looking like a team that could steal a series out there in the Eastern Conference, maybe make it to the second round, or even push for home court advantage in the first round if they continue to play the way that they have. So knowing me, this will probably curse the Celtics and they'll lose their next 8 games. Who knows? But for right now, the Celtics are rolling. So I appreciate y'all watching. Let me know what you think about the Boston Celtics. Do you think they could still win the East? Or do you at least think they are a threat in the Eastern Conference playoffs? Let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.